And I need to take a deep breath. I'll tell you when we're live. It's still loading. Thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure.
Almost there. And it looks like we are live. Give me 1 second. Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is Hemp Your Health, and we have a very special guest. And first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking a moment to connect with yourself, with your health, and for education. Our guest today is Carl Germano. Carl Germano is a New York board-certified clinical nutritionist and vice president of Verdant Oasis in Wyoming. Carl has a master's degree in clinical nutrition from the University of New York. He has over 40 years experience as vice president of product development for several of the largest vitamin supplement companies. In addition, Carl has been instrumental in bringing cutting-edge nutritional material and finished product formulations to a variety of markets, including dietary supplements, many that you would recognize and that are at your local and national health food stores and chains, medical foods, and functional beverages. Today, Carl continues his pioneering and his leadership efforts in product development and research, and is responsible for providing the industry with our next generation of clinically important phytocannabinoid ingredients, such as CBD and many others. Carl has spearheaded the Phytocannabinoid Initiative for energetics, and he is now with Verdant Oasis, a huge grower of hemp, developer, cultivator, and extractor of multi-spectrum phytocannabinoid-rich hemp oil. Carl is also the author of one of my favorite books, many of which you know, Road to Ananda. Please get this. Everything he's going to speak about, the immune system. Carl, please help me understand this too. Is it endocannabinoid?
Yes, the endocannabinoid, just like the microbiome.
How the endocannabinoid system and the microbiome crosstalk. And you may also know him as the author of The Misled Athlete, Nature's Painkillers, The Osteoporosis Solution, The Brain Wellness Plan, and again, I can't emphasize enough, The Road to Ananda. Carl Germano is going to present to us his hemp evolution, the role of the endocannabinoid system to strengthen immunity, and then he'll come back on and we can do a quick Q&A. So pay attention. We'll talk to you in a moment. Carl, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. The endocannabinoid system, as we have all learned, is just a remarkable physiological system that controls all others. It's like the master conductor in this beautiful orchestra of communication throughout the entire body. And we've heard a lot about it in areas of pain, inflammation, stress, anxiety, insomnia, bone health, neurological health. But today I want to focus on the role of the endocannabinoid system to strengthen immunity. This is such a timely topic in view of what we are exposed to for the past 6 months. With that said, before I begin, I must do the obligatory disclaimer that I'm not here to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. This presentation is strictly educational, and I am not promoting any products, what have you, and it's just really talking about the latest studies and the inferences of where we need to focus our attention to keep our immune systems healthy. Now, let me see here. Okay, so COVID-19 occupying every aspect of our lives. And we certainly must address not only the nutrients that support our immune system, but we must also address the negative impact of the mental health crisis on our immune systems. Supporting the ECS in this particular instance cannot be ignored. And quite frankly, we're living in the United States of anxiety right now. We have been bombarded with stress, anxiety, fear, depression, isolation, sleeplessness. All of these issues are suppressing our immune system to the point where it makes us more vulnerable to COVID or any other illness for that matter. And so we must look at those other issues and how we can best address them in order to stay healthy. Now, the dietary supplement industry has risen to the occasion. Again, when we look at the sales of vitamins and minerals, April and March from last year compared to this year, we see obviously vitamin C, elderberry D, zinc, and echinacea, they're skyrocketing sales, and these are very important. These are all important nutrients that are substantially influence our immune systems by supporting its function and response, but they're not alone. And while we have the obvious, like vitamin C, quercetin, zinc, and A and D, and omega-3s and nucleotides, we also must consider other important nutrients like resveratrol and melatonin and astragalus that have very important roles in keeping our immune systems healthy. But is this truly enough? Well, the key to weathering the viral storm that we are exposed to, and then we have a flu season coming up, is all about immune resilience. It's our ability to defend against the pathogen. It's our ability to kill or neutralize a threat. And it's our ability to adapt to the changing or threatening environments as these viruses also adapt and mutate as well. Well, let's talk about immunity. And right on this first slide, this is Immunity 101. To the very left is innate immunity. This is your rapid response. As soon as your body is exposed to a pathogen, immediately the foot soldiers come in. Macrophages, killer cells, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. These are your foot soldiers that unleash very powerful inflammatory compounds called cytokines. These are the inflammatory compounds that the immune system pushes out, and they do a great job. They literally burn up pathogens. But we must keep this under control, in that we don't want excessive immune response and excessive inflammation from too much cytokines. We'll get to that in a second. Then over time, as your body starts to recognize the pathogen, and that's the process of adaptive immunity, it's a slower response where you start to produce antibodies so that the next time you are exposed to this pathogen, your body recognizes it and can launch an appropriate attack immediately. Well, cytokines, let's get back to, these are very important molecules of the immune system. They help coordinate the battle against infection. They're inflammatory. And the idea is that they get released, they kill the pathogen, and everything goes away. Unfortunately, when COVID enters the lungs, it triggers immune cells to attack the virus, and that results in localized inflammation. But for many patients, excessive levels of cytokines are released in what we call hyperinflammation that can seriously harm people or even kill them. And we hear about this cytokine storm in people who are suffering from the ravages of COVID that need to be addressed. Now, the cytokine storm is not new to us. We've seen it in plenty of epidemics throughout for the longest time. Here back in 1918, the H1N1 Spanish flu, in the 50s, H2N2 Asian flu, the 60s, H3N2 Hong Kong flu, 2009, the swine flu. You had the avian flu between 1997 and 2014 and variants of it. 2013 to 16, you had MRSA and Ebola. You had the Zika virus between 2015 and 16, and now COVID. So we are chronically under attack. This is not the first or last of viral attacks that we're going to see. And it behooves us to look very closely at nutritional support, dietary changes, and the lifestyles we lead to make sure that our bodies are strong enough to deal with these viral attacks, and that it minimizes any damage that can occur. Now, when it comes to inflammation, yes, we have Boswellia, curcumin, fish oils, plenty of anti-inflammatory compounds. But one of the most important anti-inflammatory system is controlled by your endocannabinoid system. And here in the current opinions in clinical nutrition metabolic care, we look at the fact that, and that's in March in 2014, of the fact that the endocannabinoid system is the key emerging player in inflammation because it is intertwined with all the processes that is involved with inflammation, including the eicosanoid pathways, which omega-3s help manage and control. When we look at other data, here in Neuropsychopharmacology 2017, the endogenous cannabinoid system, a budding source of targets for addressing inflammation, and they review a lot of the analgesic and anti-inflammatory effects of the cannabinoids we produce in the body, called endocannabinoids, that include reducing inflammatory signaling, what's something you may want to do when you have hyperinflammation going on in the body. But lowering inflammation is all about timing. And here, Dr. Tobias Toll at a Memorial Sloan Kettering here in New York said it best, that when we treat people to lower inflammation with drugs, or I can relate to even some of our nutritional components we have in the marketplace, how do they lower inflammation? Well, one of the ways some of the drugs and some nutrients lower inflammation is by suppressing the immune system. Remember, it's the immune system cells that are producing these cytokines that are causing inflammation. So what we're trying to do here is, when you suppress the body's immune system, the very moment that it's trying to fight off a deadly virus, there are unintended consequences, which means the infection could get worse. So for the people who are in the midst of suffering and having this cytokine storm, we have to be very careful about the anti-inflammatories that lower inflammation, because things get worse. We have to let the docs do what they need to do to stabilize the patient, and we have to focus on prevention before infection and recovery, more importantly, with these anti-inflammatories as well. So who are the obvious who are susceptible to the ravages of viruses? Well, you've got elderly, people with lung disease, immunocompromised. This is kind of obvious stuff. But the Centers for Disease Control are very telling here, in that 80% of all deaths, 45% of all hospitalizations, and 53% of intensive care unit admissions are associated with people over the age of 65. Why? Hey, well, as we get older, all of our organ systems start to decline in terms of their functionality and optimal support in the body. So it's not uncommon that this is an obvious group. Then we look at who are outside of the obvious elderly, who are the more susceptible to the ravages of COVID. And right down the middle here, we've got people who suffer from metabolic syndrome, obesity at the top, diabetes, hypertension. And quite frankly, when we look at obesity, there is already respiratory dysfunctional issues, low lung volume, low muscle strength in the lungs, you have comorbidities, and you have metabolic risk factors that all contribute to the severe course of a COVID infection. How so? Well, take a look at Morbidity Mortality Weekly Reports, March of 2020, and the Journal of the American Medical Association, April of 2020. 90% of all the COVID admissions involved comorbidities of either hypertension, obesity, diabetes, or some adjunct comorbidity as well. And what this all relates to is a lot of the blood sugar being out of control. And here, Dr. Ribner out of Emory School of Medicine said it best, that the immune system is really incapable of putting up with this major assault, and that high blood sugar can reduce the ability of white blood cells to fight infection in people with diabetes, let alone they have problems with their lungs as well. So it's imperative that we understand that what the media should have been telling us, the people who should truly have been quarantining themselves, are the elderly, obese, hypertensive, diabetics, people with lung disease. That's who truly should have been, not this lockdown that every man, woman, and child, and let herd immunity take place. But for the majority of us, before COVID attacks our lungs, it's invading our minds. Again, we are living in this United States of anxiety. We are fearful, anxious. We've got a lot of stress, whether it be from the virus itself to losing your job, living at home with family and locked down like prisoners. This is creating a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety. And as we know, for the past 50 years, we've had tremendous amount of data and books that have been published on this relationship between mind and body, and how if you affect the mind, how you can disrupt your immune system as well. And supporting the endocannabinoid system is crucial to take care of the fear, anxiety, and other issues that we'll just cover right now. So outside of the obvious groups of elderly, obese, hypertensive, diabetics, who are the more prone to immune suppression and susceptibility to not just COVID, but other viral issues, the not so obvious, the rest of us, because we all are suffering from this stress and anxiety and lack of sleep, which absolutely will suppress your immunity as well. I wrote an article back in April of 2020, and it was published in the Whole Foods magazine on the mental health crisis and the role of the endocannabinoid system in addressing stress, anxiety, and poor sleep in COVID. And as we got to see in other media attention, the Washington Post, WebMD, that this mental health crisis is a pandemic. We look at the Journal of Medical Virology of frontline workers, over 2,000 were studied. And what are they worried about? Being infected, being in danger, self-illness, infecting family, poor quality sleep, needing psychological guidance. And outside of these frontline workers, I think this has been on the minds of all of us during this pandemic. And so we're all suffering as well. Forbes and Time magazine also talked about the psychological toll and mental health issues that are affecting us. And in the Time magazine article, there was an interesting survey that looked at the mental pandemic that has tripled during the past 2 years. From 2018 to 2020, nervousness, restlessness, effort, everything's in efforts, being sad, hopeless, worthless, anxiety medications literally have tripled over the past 2 years because of what we're going through. And quite frankly, this all brings us back to what I talked about, this mind-body connection. Here in Immunology 2014, the deep connection between our emotional and immune status, that anxiety and depression causes the loss of key immune cells, which can negatively impact us. And the World Health Organization has suggested by 2030 that stress-related problems will be the most debilitating widespread health problems on this planet. We know that when we're under chronic stress, it reduces our immune system. It reduces our ability to fight pathogens, making us more susceptible to infections. And we know at the heart and soul of this connection are the stress hormones that suppress immunity. And out of all the stress hormones, the one that's gotten the most attention is cortisol. Here in Brain Behavior and Immunity, 2017, we looked at anxiety-related disorders, how they increase cytokines, inflammatory conditions, and that people who have anxiety-related disorders have increased inflammatory response. The last thing we need in people who are suffering from lung infiltration of inflammatory messengers that are out of control. We know that cortisol elevated from stress and anxiety chronically affects all organ systems, especially your immune system. When we look at endocannabinoids and stress signaling, here in Neurobiological Stress 2019, we see that the endocannabinoid system plays a major role in the stress response. We look at the two cannabinoids we produce, anandamide and 2-AG, and their intimate roles in initiating the acute stress response, but then terminating it. Adaptation. This is all about the endocannabinoid system keeping us in balance. And that's what we're talking about when we're under chronic stress. We're out of balance, and we've got high levels of these stress hormones. And what the other cannabinoid we produce, 2-AG, does is help to terminate the chronic stress response so we can adapt better. In Biological Psychiatry 2019, how elevations of anandamide, the other cannabinoid we produce in the body, this was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. There was a 10-fold increase in anandamide that was associated with fear extinction. So for all the fear that we're having about this virus, how your cannabinoid system and the use of phytocannabinoids to support that system can be tremendously important with extinction of fear memory. And we've seen this in post-traumatic stress disorders as well. Here in the Journal of Basic Clinical Physiological Pharmacology 2016, we looked at all the preclinical and clinical data of the stress-related challenges that are associated with decreased endocannabinoid tone. What are we talking about? That we're under a lot of stress, we produce less of these cannabinoids in the body that's feeding into these stress-related challenges. So how best do we relate to increasing endocannabinoid tone? And the best way to increase endocannabinoid tone is the use of hemp phytocannabinoids. So when we take hemp products, they help support the endocannabinoid system through their own phytocannabinoids that work like the endocannabinoids, the cannabinoids we produce in our body. Here in translational psychiatry, again, we get this look at one of our cannabinoids, anandamide, that we produce in the body, that when it gets too low, it's a statistically significant positive indicator for stress-induced anxiety. So now we're looking at the cannabinoids we produce in our body as biological markers that when they get too low, we know trouble and issues and conditions can exist. And this is a direct tie-in that when our cannabinoid levels get low in the body, it is a positive indicator that we're going to have a lot of stress-induced anxiety. Something we must treat, and a viable therapeutic strategy is to, again, use hemp phytocannabinoids as a botanical treatment. There have been a number of interesting papers on looking at CBD specifically, and here was a review paper in animal models and healthy human volunteers that CBD has anti-anxiety effects, anxiolytic effects, and also are useful in patients with social anxiety disorders as well. And this was a great review paper. Also in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine in 2019, the administration of oral CBD, in addition to routine psychiatric care, was associated with reduced symptoms in people who have post-traumatic stress disorder in adults, and that CBD appeared to offer relief in people who had frequent nightmares and a memory recall of traumatic issues. And again, we talk about extinction of fear and memory issues. We look at current opinions in psychiatry of 2020 and cannabinoid research in 2020, how cannabidiol preparations have significant effects on anxiety-reducing properties, as well as for PTSD and emotion regulation to lower fear and stress, why it's so important to support the endocannabinoid system during these high periods. And then in an interesting paper in PLOS One, endocannabinoid system regulating sleep. Remember, the other issue that we are dealing with during the past 7 months here have been problems with sleep. Now we know that when you're under a lot of stress, high cortisol levels that I spoke about can interfere with sleep. We also know that when you're very anxious, your head is spinning and you're thinking all over the place, and it interferes with sleep. So what does the endocannabinoid system do for that? Well, here in PLOS One in 2016, how endocannabinoid signaling regulates sleep cycling and stability. It also increases not only non-rapid eye movement, but also increases the length of rapid eye movement as well. And we see that in both, which are both important parts of the sleep cycle. Here in Neuroscience Behavioral Reviews in 2016, we know that endocannabinoids promote both rapid eye and non-rapid eye movement sleep and helps restore sleep in several animal models of insomnia. And then in a Journal of Sleep Research in 2015, again, the role of objective sleep in natural history here. This was over 1,700 individuals in a Penn State adult cohort study. And looking at poor sleep and insomnia that's significantly associated with people who have depression. So people who are depressed right now, other than we know that stress and anxiety producing high cortisol levels can interfere with your sleep. On the other side of the stress-related diseases like depression, that can absolutely worsen insomnia and again, therefore reduce our immune support as well. In original research contributions, an interesting paper, a large retrospective case series of here how anxiety scores decreased with the application of CBD in over 103 people. Sleep scores improved within the first month, and that cannabidiol will hold benefit in people who have anxiety-related sleep disorders. Now, this brings us to the type of product that you should be focusing on when trying to support the endocannabinoid system. And there's been tremendous amounts of research out there. We've got traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, talk about the relationship of a whole plant versus a single magic bullet. But this was a beautiful paper. The language is so, I have to repeat it, in the Journal of Herbal Medicine in 2013. Listen to this language. Plant synergy occurs because of the interactive effects of the whole plant as a complete matrix consisting of numerous and diverse chemical constituents are greater or more effective than the additive effects of individual constituents. And that plant synergy gives rise to modulation of biochemical pathways resulting in plant activity emerging from the synergistic relationship and interaction of the parts that cannot be found with individual constituents. Where am I going with this? I'm going into this whole issue of CBD isolates versus whole plant botanical concentrates of hemp, of how superior whole plant extracts are to this single magic bullet myopic CBD isolates and high distillate products on the marketplace. Let's face it, the literature is rich in supporting what I'm just telling you. Here in Pharmacology and Pharmacy in 2015, overcoming the bell-shaped dose response curve of cannabidiol versus enriched extracts of whole plants, and again showing greater clinical benefit with whole extracts versus this single magic bullet approach, because we know there's a dose response curve to CBD isolate that after a certain level, you lose effectiveness. And the optimal dosage range is certainly decreased compared to giving whole extracts. In Frontiers of Neurology, the potential clinical benefits of CBD-rich cannabis extracts versus purified CBD in epilepsy, again, showing the rich extracts of the whole plant being superior to CBD isolates. And then finally, in Dr. Ethan Russo's beautiful paper in the British Journal of Pharmacology, Taming THC, the potential cannabis synergy of having the entourage effects available to you when you use whole plant extracts. No different here as any herb. When you take ginseng, you're not taking one ginsenoside. There's a whole family of ginsenosides. Same thing with ginkgo, same thing with echinacea, same thing with every single herb that you ingest. No different here. We should be looking for whole plant concentrates and extracts of hemp, not just CBD. The lesson learned here, the family is more important than any single isolate you can pull from. And this is what is critically important. So what I've tried to instill upon you is this important issue that during this very important period of time in history that we are involved in, we are exposed to a virus that we've never been exposed to before, it acting very different than other coronaviruses we've been exposed to. We got to understand that while there are many nutrients that are important with keeping the immune system healthy, that yes, you should take, that one of the things that we've ignored is the issue of the stress, anxiety, the fear, the isolation, the sleep deprivation that is making us all more susceptible to viral attacks that the endocannabinoid system has direct control over. And so supporting the endocannabinoid system is of utmost importance during any flu season, viral attack, you name it. I'm not saying it is a cure. I'm saying that this is a physiological system that you must contend with in order to keep your immune systems supported and healthy. And with that said, again, immune support is not just vitamin C to elderberry. Before COVID attacks our lungs, it is invading our mind. Keep very aware of the body-mind communication that goes on, especially the brain-gut immune connection to keep our bodies healthy, of which the endocannabinoid system controls. And with that said, I want to wish you happy and healthy cannabinoids. Thank you so much, and we'll be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Holy moly, Carl. This is so much information and it's so spot on. We spend a lot of time and attention on stress,
Yep.
nutrients that build and repair the endocannabinoid system, the omega fatty acids, omega-3s. We talk a lot about for building, repairing those receptors and also helping the body make our own endogenous cannabinoids. So stress is huge for us because we understand that it is the epidemic of the 21st century.
Mhm.
And there's some people here that probably don't understand that the stress is also very much affecting their gut. Can we talk a moment about that, how much of the endocannabinoid system is regulating the immune system, which 70% of that is in their GI tract?
Yeah, and it's an excellent point. I mean, again, I can make this a 4-hour lecture today, and there's a lot to cover, but let's talk about this. Very important. Your endocannabinoid system is a massive series of receptors and the cannabinoids you produce, anandamide and 2-AG. And we know all of this. We call it the endocannabinoidome. In your gut, in the Journal of Gastroenterology 2014, we made clear connections that the endocannabinoid system controls gut motility, it controls inflammation, it controls the communication along with the microbiome to complete this important triad of the brain-gut immune connection. And why is this so important? Well, we know that the brain pushes out messengers called neurotransmitters that talk to the immune system and the rest of the body. We know the immune system pushes out immunotransmitters that talk to the brain and the rest of the body. And then slap right down the middle, we got the gut. What the heck is the gut doing in this triad? Well, you know, during fetal development, the cells that build the brain branch off to build the gut, and it's all connected by the vagus nerve. And what we got to learn is that your intestinal tract is your largest immune organ. That's right, it's littered with hundreds of millions of immune cells, and rightfully so. We're dumping in foreign pathogens, literally, and foreign things every single day when we eat, when we breathe in foods, and toxins and what have you. You know, the gut has to be our first interaction with the outside world for the most part, that we must have the immune system well represented there to either launch an attack or let them go through. So that's why we find hundreds of millions of neurons in there, immune cells. But dig deeper, and what we also find are hundreds of millions of neurons, brain cells. That's right, your gut is your second brain. So the next time you have a gut feeling, understand that your brain is well represented in your gut, and your intuition is very important in life. Stick with it. So when we look at this intestinal tract, it's no longer just an organ of digestion. It's an organ that really represents your second brain and your immune system. And that's why this triad of gut-brain immunity is so important to keep our bodies healthy. But as I've said before, right in the middle of what's coordinating all of this important communication activity, and health and maintenance of the brain, of the immune system, and of the gut is the endocannabinoid system. So if your endocannabinoid system is suffering, your immune system and your brain will suffer as well. It is critical to help support it. And I always say, when people talk to me, patients see me and what have you, and you have foundation products. You're taking a multi, you're taking a probiotic, you're taking omega-3s. Great. What you need as a foundation product is low dose phytocannabinoids, because the phytocannabinoids in hemp act like a multivitamin for the endocannabinoid system, keeping the most important physiological system healthy, that keeps you healthy, because the major overriding function, the global picture of the endocannabinoid system, is to maintain homeostasis, health, well-being, and balance in the body. Let alone, if we go down each organ system, we could see how the intimate relationship between the endocannabinoid system and keeping the brain healthy, your lungs healthy, your heart healthy, your gut healthy, and we can go on and on. But this is why this importance of probiotics, your microbiome, and phytocannabinoids to support the endocannabinoid in the gut is critical to affect the brain and the immune system, which is affecting the control of stress, anxiety, and anxiety-related disorders that we have to address to keep the immune system healthy.
Oh, this is so powerful. You mentioned something about low dose.
Mhm.
We do have a question from a listener from for a beginner. How do they know? And I'd like to include children in this too, because a lot of people call us and ask, is this safe for children? And I have my opinion on that, professional opinion, but we want to hear it from you. So first of all, for a beginner, how do they know how much to begin with and to make sure it's enough? And then can we speak to, is this safe for children?
Well, thanks to the way hemp has been treated, or I should say mistreated in this country, we've been in the dark ages for 80 years when hemp was locked up under the Controlled Substances Act. Lo and behold, it gets released in 2018 under the Farm Bill, and we finally are able to not only cultivate it, commercialize it, consume it, but we also can now study it. So we've been in the dark ages with respect to this. So you'll have to bear with the fact that we don't have all of the answers yet in terms of the right dose. We know that there are a majority of the population out there, people who are suffering from pain, inflammation, stress, anxiety, insomnia, bone problems, neurological problems, all have endocannabinoid deficiency states. And Dr. Ethan Russo wrote several papers on endocannabinoid deficiencies, things like fibromyalgia, migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, many conditions where we can now measure that we have low endocannabinoids. And so these are people who will benefit tremendously from taking hemp phytocannabinoids. For the vast majority of us then who are looking at what dose to take, I say low dose, I'm looking at 5 to 10 milligrams of phytocannabinoids as something that can be taken every day. And these are for adults who don't have issues that I just mentioned, because then that will warrant maybe higher doses, that to be just safe and supportive, just like we take a multivitamin to afford for the deficiencies in our diet. We take low dose phytocannabinoids for the deficiencies that may exist in our body, as well as to help support the most important physiological system in the body, the endocannabinoid system. As far as children are concerned, yes, they can benefit from small doses, a couple of milligrams daily. But again, if they're suffering from any issues, then again, we can get higher, but that's done under the guidance of a healthcare practitioner.
I absolutely feel like most people, it's an exception if you don't have clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, because we burn up more nutrients with stress than we replenish, even with the normal supplements and sleep, exercise, singing, dancing, all these things that produce endogenous cannabinoids. So really just trust that this is safe. And are there any side effects that you know of if someone overdoes it? I'm a big experimenter, so I like to go up to that threshold, but what would you say is a side effect besides health if someone takes too much?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the reports of potential liver issues, but those were reports that were done with single magic bullet CBD, which to me, the isolates are nothing more than drugs. And you don't see those deleterious effects when you use whole plant extracts. That's number one. But more importantly, when we get to the higher doses of phytocannabinoids, we have to be aware that they do affect liver function at high doses. And that is to say, they affect primarily the detoxification pathways, primarily cytochrome P450. So what does this all mean and why we have to talk about this? When people are on medications, your liver has the capability of detoxifying it, neutralizing it, or letting it go through. Our detoxification systems, our cytochrome P450 system, can either be increased or decreased at high levels of CBD, and that is something then has to be discussed with the person's practitioner, because if they're on medications, that can either make the medication either less effective or it can keep blood levels too high. So these are things that need to be monitored, but this is not that unusual. We have a whole handful of nutrients in the dietary supplement marketplace that affect the liver's cytochrome P450 system. So in general, if we keep at the lower doses, you won't have these issues. You'll benefit tremendously from it. But at higher doses, please work with your practitioner.
I love this. Anyone else have questions, let me know. We can also put them in the comments after we finish this. We are about to wrap this up. I really want to emphasize a few things that Carl has shared with us. Prevention before infection. We do not wait till we get sick to take care of ourselves. Prevention is key. The endocannabinoid system is a huge part of what happens downstream. The inflammation, the anxiety. We know stress is the epidemic of the 21st century, which he pointed out with the research and the science, and that the endocannabinoid system helps all this communication from your organs to your tissues to the communication itself. So really bring in your full spectrum, high quality CBD and nutrition and lifestyle. This will help your sleep. This will help your gut. It makes you more conscious, intuitive, because our mind and body are bridged. Is this correct, by the endocannabinoid system, Carl?
100%. And one of my loves is how the endocannabinoid system controls consciousness. And this is for certainly another time, but there's no doubt there is an intimate relationship, because the endocannabinoid system is involved in all facets of the perceptions of the outside world, our feelings, our perceptions, what have you. And some interesting data is evolving on the role of the endocannabinoid system in consciousness.
That is a beautiful note to end on. Everyone, elevate your consciousness. Get healthy. Trust that prevention is the best medicine, that this touches every aspect of your being, your healing, your health, and your prevention. Remember, you can join our team. We are passionate about education. This has been incredible to learn from one of my favorite teachers, Carl Germano. Everyone, please get this book. If you want to get more details of what Carl was sharing, you can see my book is like totally marked up. All the pages about the endocannabinoid biome, sleep, anxiety, immune system are in this book. We have lots of specials. I don't even want to go into it. I am so grateful. Carl, sometime in the near future, hopefully you will come back and we can talk about consciousness, and maybe even if there's any research on the energetic field of the endocannabinoid system, and you can bring so much more wisdom to our audience.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you all. Mwah. Go celebrate your health. Enjoy your health. Enjoy your hemp. Carl, thank you. Till next time, we'll see you soon. Enjoy your health and hemp.